In this chapter, we're going to handle text in Adobe Illustrator. Now, before you go, well, it's going to be kind of boring for a chapter, isn't it? It isn't. Because number one, we're talking about Adobe Illustrator, and I don't think there's anything boring in this program. And number two, when we're talking about what this program can do to text, you can do anything you've ever dreamed of to text, and maybe a few things you haven't dreamed of yet. Now, before we get started, let me show you my setup. I'm working in pointcontainer.ai. That's in your working folder if you want it. And number two, up to this point in what we have done in these lessons, if you're kind of following along, and I do recommend that because I kind of teach in building blocks, we've been using the Essentials workspace, haven't we? And I'll tell you what, come over here to this button and click it. We do have a typography space that is dedicated just to type. Select it if you want to. And now we have all things type. Now before we get started, let me give you what I consider to be a definition of the applications out there that handle letters of the alphabet, word processors and typesetters. Adobe Illustrator falls into the category of typesetter, which means you can do anything you want, micromanage the text like crazy. Word processors are simpler applications, but I only use the word simple in respect to programs like typesetters, because I'm talking about as word processors, Microsoft Word, WordPerfect. Those are not simple programs, please. But in terms of how you type, they are more predictive. Anybody out there start with a regular typewriter? I mean a traditional see in the museum kind of thing today, because a lot of people don't even have those anymore. I did. I started out when my dad gave me one, and I started working on it. I graduated to an IBM Selectric, which was an electric typewriter, which was like really cool, and then I went into computers. I understand the process of using one. There are similarities in how we handle text, but computers really help us out here. But if you think about things like a word processor, when you start typing, basically it kind of does things for you. It goes down to the next line when you reach the end of that particular row. It creates a new page if you need a new page. These programs, typesetters, they rely on you to understand what you're doing and create things as you move along. Now, if you're planning on a large document with lots of text, Adobe Illustrator is not the program for that. Although it will manage text that way, we work on an artboard, not pages. These are artboards. But if you are looking for an application that can do large documents like books, hundreds of pages, add graphics, all kinds of crazy stuff, click one button and either send it to print, send it to a publisher, or even publish it out on iTunes. My absolute favorite program for that is InDesign. You've got to try that program out. And there are a lot of similarities between InDesign and Illustrator. So if you know Illustrator, you're kind of halfway there. Now let's do this. Let's pick up the type tool here. See it right there? If you click and hold, you get all these different types of tools. Now the only one we're going to work with right now is the type tool in this lesson. We're going to talk about the difference between container text and point text over here. So that's the only one we really need for now. But we will go through these and talk about them. And here's a brand new one, Touch Type Tool. It allows you to actually transform text either by character or by word or whatever and still remain live text. You don't have to convert it to outlines. Pretty cool. Let's go to the Type Tool. Okay. Now notice the cursor has a square around it. Actually, technically, I guess that's a rectangle. And that means you are beginning or starting a new point text area or container text. Let's start with point text. Come over here and just click. Now when you click, you are setting the left boundary for the typing, where it will begin to type. Obviously, we can move that anywhere we want to later. Cursor's blinking, ready for me to go. Up here, it's telling me, if you want, I'm using Myriad Pro. You don't want to, choose a font. Now you will see your fonts up there, not mine. It's regular. Check out all those styles. It's amazing. All those different things, italics and everything. And over here, it's saying it's 14 point. Now that's not default. Default's 12. But the last thing I did while I was practicing for this lesson is I did some typing and I changed that to 14. So it remembers that. It remembers the last thing you did. But that's document specific. If I close Illustrator down, open up a new document, it would say Myriad Pro regular 12 point. 12's the default. You got options over here for paragraphs, aligning, transform. Let's just come down here and click again and start typing. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. Now the next word or the last word in that sentence is back. all the letters of the alphabet. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog's back. I want back on the next line down, but we're dealing with point text. Point text does not recognize the right margin. The right margin is controlled like traditional typewriters, and I'm talking about you have to use the carriage return to get down to the next line. If I continue typing, that line would remain and stay there even though I looped around the planet 3 times. So I have to understand, I have to watch it just like a typewriter and press the return key. Now that's return key on a Macintosh and enter in Windows. Same keys, different frustrating names, and I go down to the next line and finish the sentence. Period. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog's back. So one of the things about point text is that you decide when it goes down to the next line. And there are many times where you might want that to happen. That's not the only thing about point text, but that's one. You have to decide the carriage return. Now, let's talk about container text. If I come over here, notice the I-beam looks like an I-beam and it doesn't have a little box around it. Now, the reason for that is it still thinks I'm typing over on the other side, and if I begin typing, even if I click over here, it's still going to type over there. So what do? Hold down the Control key in Windows, Command key on a Mac, and click one time. Now, you see the little box around it? Now watch this. If I come over here, see the box go away? If I click, I'm back over there again. But if I click anywhere else, I start a new area. But I don't want point text, do I? I want container text. Now here's the difference. Instead of clicking, get where you want the text to start in the upper left and click and drag. You're defining the boundaries for your text, the area, if you will, that it will go in. Now later on you'll see that doesn't have to be a square. It can be anything you want it to be. My cursor is obediently up in the upper left-hand corner waiting for me to type something. So let's type something here. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. The difference being I did not press the return key, enter key on a Windows system, return on Mac, to get down to the next line because this defined what's called a soft return. That was a hard return. That's a soft return. So I can still control these margins. Now let's do this. Let me select this text. That's click and a drag, or Control A would do the same thing. Edit copy, or Control, and that's Control in Windows, Command on a Mac C. Come to the end right there and paste it. And I'll use the shortcut. That's Control on Windows, Command on a Mac V, as in victory. Man, I can type fast, can't I? Okay, it's following the margins. It's doing a very good job of putting the text within the container text that I define. If I did the same thing on the other side, it wouldn't work. It would keep going and going and going and going. Now, a couple of other things about working with container versus point. If I come over here, let's pick up our regular selection tool, which allows us to control the box or control over here, either one. If I come over here and say change the margin, the text will be more than glad to reformat itself to fit the new margin. If I come over here, this little button right here is new. If I double click on that button, it will convert the container text into point text, or vice versa. I'll show you that over on the other side, just by double clicking on that button. But if I go to a corner, notice the text isn't changing. The container is changing. The thing about container text is I can put the text into anything that I want to put it into, but the text will remain as it was, left to right, and the margins will be determined by the container it's in, circle, square, whatever it is. Let me undo that twice and get it back. I like undo. Let's come over here. Now if I click on this one, watch what happens when I come over here and rotate it, for example. The text actually will rotate. That didn't happen over here. What if I resize the box? I might come over here and grab. Now watch the text. It stretches the text. Let me undo that. If I decide that I started with point text and I really don't want that, I want container text. Instead of going through the menus and getting to it, the new feature, all you gotta do is double click. And you are now in container text with all the rights and privileges of a container. Now if I come back over here real quick, and I take this box, see this little box down here first, this little white little box down here. That's called the overset box. And if I come over here and do this, notice it changes to a little plus sign. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's a plus sign. That means there is more text then it can show me because I've reduced the size of the container. If I attempt to print this now, I've got a problem because that text won't print. But if you attempt to print this document, you will get a warning saying that you have overset text. Now, don't ignore that warning because it means it's not going to print all of the text. If I pull that down again, we'll talk later about how we deal with that. But if I take that down again, you'll see it will go away if I've got enough room. Now, that line won't print, obviously. It will look more like that. So container text controls the margins of the text in the area that you're typing. You can change the margins, and it will reformat the text. You can even rotate it, and the text stays the same. It just takes on the new margins based on the container. In point text, well, it kind of does its own thing, doesn't it? It will go on and on and on until you press the return key to take it down, enter key on a Windows system, return on Mac. And when you maneuver it or manipulate it, it basically changes the format of the text itself. Big difference between the two, but one of the new features, which I love, is just double-clicking here to go from one to the other. Container text, point text.